The Varethian Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their ships filled the darkness between worlds like swarms of metal insects. Their armies had crushed every enemy. Their scientists had unlocked secrets that other species could not even dream of. They were the masters of the galaxy, and they believed this would never change. They were wrong. High Admiral Kethrava stood alone on the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Sovereignty. He was old, even by Varethian standards. His gray skin had grown pale with age, and his eyes had seen more battles than he could count. He had spent 300 years serving the Empire. He had watched it grow stronger with each passing century. Now he watched it die. Through the massive windows, he could see the planet below. It was called Veth Prime, one of the oldest colony worlds in the Empire. 3 billion Varethians lived there. They had cities that touched the clouds. They had factories that covered entire continents. They had been proud and strong. Now they were silent. The lights on the planet's surface had gone dark 2 days ago. All communication had stopped. Ships that flew down to investigate never returned. The planet had simply stopped, like a heart that forgot how to beat. This was the silence. This was the thing that was killing the Empire. Kethrava did not know where it came from. No one did. It had started 6 months ago on a small mining station at the edge of their territory. The station went quiet. Then the nearby ships went quiet. Then the whole system went quiet. And it spread. The silence moved through their technology like poison through blood. It infected their computers, their engines, their weapons. Everything connected to the great network that ran the Empire became a path for the silence to follow. And everything it touched died. In 6 months, the Empire had lost 60% of its territory. Not to war, not to rebellion, to nothing. To silence, Admiral. A voice spoke behind him. Kethrava did not turn around. He knew who it was. Lieutenant Varakos, his censor officer. She was young and talented. She had her whole life ahead of her. He wondered if she would live to see the end of the year. "What is it?" he asked. "There is a ship, Admiral. It just appeared at the edge of the system." Now Kethrava turned. His eyes narrowed with confusion. "Appeared? What do you mean?" "I do not know how to explain it, Admiral. One moment there was nothing. The next moment there was a ship. It did not come through any of the normal travel lanes. It did not use any technology we recognize." Kethrava walked toward the bridge, his long legs carrying him quickly across the metal floor. The bridge was a large circular room filled with officers at their stations. Giant screens showed images of the space around them. On one of those screens, he saw it. The ship was small, very small. It was perhaps 1/100th the size of his flagship. Its design was ugly and crude, all sharp angles and thick metal plates. It looked like something a child might build from spare parts. "What is that thing?" Kethrava asked. "Unknown, Admiral. We have never seen anything like it, but it is transmitting a signal." "A signal? In what language?" Varakos looked at him with an expression he could not read. "Ours, Admiral. It is speaking our language." Kethrava felt something cold move through his body. He had fought many enemies in his long life. He had faced death many times. But this was different. This was something new, something impossible. "Play it," he ordered. The speakers on the bridge crackled to life. A voice filled the room. It was a strange voice, warm and calm, speaking Varethian with an odd accent. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the UEN Defiant. We picked up your distress signals from 3 sectors away. Do you require assistance?" The bridge went completely silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing and stared at the speakers. Kethrava stood frozen in place, his mind trying to understand what he had just heard. "Admiral," Varakos said slowly, "I checked the database. That ship, it comes from a region we call Sector 7G. It is a quarantine zone. The species there were supposed to be primitive. They were not supposed to have space travel for another 1,000 years." Kethrava remembered Sector 7G. It was a small region far from the center of the Empire. There were a few young species there, still playing with simple tools on their home worlds. They had been marked for future conquest, future integration into the Empire. They were supposed to be nothing. "Send a response," Kethrava said. His voice was steady, but his hearts were beating fast. "Tell them we acknowledge their signal. Ask them who they are. The communication officer worked at his station. A moment later, the strange voice came back. "Admiral Kathrava, we are humans from the planet Earth. We have been exploring this region for the past few years. We detected massive energy signatures and what appeared to be distress calls. We came to see if we could help humans." Kathrava had never heard the word before. Earth. He did not know that name either. But this ship, this tiny ugly ship, had somehow crossed distances that should have taken centuries. It had found them in the darkness. It had come offering help. Why? Kathrava asked, speaking directly into the communication channel. "Why would you help us? You do not know us." There was a pause. Then the human voice answered, "Because you are in trouble, and we were close enough to try." Kathrava stood in silence, staring at the image of the small ship on the screen. Behind him, his officers whispered to each other. Outside, the dead planet turned slowly in the void. The Empire was dying. Everything he had known was falling apart. And somewhere in the darkness, a species that should not exist had come to help. He did not understand. He was not sure he would ever understand. But for the first time in 6 months, High Admiral Kathrava felt something other than despair. He felt curiosity. "Tell them," he said slowly, "that we accept their offer. Tell them to approach and prepare a meeting room." He did not know what these humans wanted. He did not know if they could truly help. But he knew one thing for certain: everything was about to change. The shuttle from the human ship was even uglier up close. It was a box of gray metal with small wings and engines that burned with blue fire. It landed in the docking bay of the Eternal Sovereignty with a loud clang, and for a long moment, nothing happened. Ambassador Tyrovos stood at the front of the welcoming group. He was tall and thin, dressed in the formal robes of his office. Behind him stood 20 soldiers in full armor, their weapons ready. They did not know what to expect from these humans. They were prepared for anything. The door of the shuttle opened with a hiss of air. A ramp extended down to the floor, and then the humans walked out. There were 5 of them. They wore simple gray uniforms with no decoration. They walked on 2 legs, like Varethians, but they were shorter and softer. Their skin came in different colors, from pale pink to deep brown. They had only 2 eyes, small and round, set in flat faces. At the front of the group was a woman. Her hair was gray and cut short. Her face had lines of age around her eyes and mouth. She walked with the confidence of someone who had commanded others for many years. This, Tyrovos knew, was Captain Elena Vasquez. She stopped in front of him and smiled. It was a strange expression, showing her teeth, but her eyes were warm. "Ambassador Tyrovos," she said, "thank you for meeting us." Tyrovos nodded slowly. "Captain Vasquez, welcome aboard the Eternal Sovereignty. I must admit, your arrival has caused some confusion among our people. I imagine it has." Vasquez said, "We are probably not what you expected." "No," Tyrovos admitted. "You are not. Our records show that your species should not have developed space travel yet. You were. You were supposed to be primitive." The captain's smile did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. "Supposed to be. That is an interesting way to put it. May I ask what else your records say about us?" Tyrovos hesitated. He knew what the records said. Sector 7G was marked for future integration. The humans were on a list, scheduled to be brought into the Empire in another 1,000 years. They would have been conquered, their culture erased, their people absorbed into Varethian society. This was the way of the Empire. This was how it had grown so large. But looking at this woman, standing calm and confident on the deck of his flagship, Tyrovos chose not to share this information. "The records say very little," he said instead. "Perhaps you can tell us about yourselves." Vasquez nodded. "Perhaps I can. But first, I would like to learn about your problem. The silence, you call it. We detected its effects from a great distance. It looked like your entire civilization was shutting down." Tyrovos led the humans through the ship to a meeting room. As they walked, the human visitors looked at everything with curious eyes. They asked questions about the technology they saw, the materials used in construction, the systems that controlled the ship. Their questions were simple, but surprisingly sharp. In the meeting room, Tyrovos explained the silence. He told them how it had started, how it had spread, how it was killing the Empire from within. He showed them data and images and reports. The humans listened carefully, sometimes nodding, sometimes whispering to each other. When he finished, Captain Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to one of her officers, a young man with dark skin and serious eyes. "Commander Okonkwo, what do you think?" The young man studied the data on the screen in front of him. "It is not a disease," he said slowly. "It is not alive. It is a code error, a cascade failure." Tyrolvos frowned. "What do you mean?" "Your entire civilization runs on connected systems," Okonkwo explained. "Every ship, every planet, every station is linked to the same central network. They all share the same basic programming. This makes things efficient, but it also creates a weakness. If something goes wrong with the core code, it spreads everywhere at once. The silence is not an attack," Vasquez added. "It is a flaw in your own technology. Somewhere in your base programming, there is a mistake, a small error that went unnoticed for centuries. But over time, that error grew. It multiplied, and now it has reached a critical point. The code is eating itself." Tyrolvos stared at them. "How can you know this? You have been here for less than an hour." "Because we have made similar mistakes," Vasquez said. "Humanity has been building technology for only a few centuries. We are young compared to you, but we have learned some hard lessons. We have had our own disasters, our own collapses, and we learned the most important lesson of all." "What lesson?" Vasquez leaned forward. "Never connect everything. Never build one system that controls all things. Always have backups. Always have alternatives. Make your technology stupid and separate, so that when one part fails, the others survive." She gestured toward the window, where the small human ship floated in the distance. "The Defiant is not elegant. It is not advanced. By your standards, it is probably primitive, but it has 17 different systems that can each run the entire ship independently. Nothing is connected to everything. If one part dies, the others keep working." Tyrolvos looked at the ugly little ship. He had thought it was crude, simple, the product of a young and ignorant species. Now he saw it differently. It was not crude. It was careful. It was built by people who had learned to fear their own creations. "Can you help us?" he asked. Vasquez was quiet for a long time. Her eyes moved to the window, to the dead planet turning slowly in the darkness beyond. "I do not know," she said honestly. "Your civilization is 12,000 years old. Ours is less than 500. We are children compared to you, but we have something you do not have. We have experience with failure. We know how to survive when everything falls apart." She stood up and walked to the window. Her reflection floated over the stars. "We came here because we heard your distress signals. We came because you needed help. We did not know who you were or what you had done. We only knew that someone was dying in the darkness, and we were close enough to try." She turned back to face Tyrolvos. "So yes, we will try to help you, but I need you to understand something first. Whatever we do, it will not be easy. It will not be painless. To save your civilization, we may have to destroy part of it. We may have to tear down systems that have worked for thousands of years. We may have to make you weak before we can make you strong. And if we refuse, then the silence will continue to spread. And in a year, maybe less, there will be no Varethian Empire. There will be nothing but quiet ships floating in the void." Tyrolvos looked at the strange small creature from a world he had never heard of. She spoke with no fear, no hesitation. She offered help but did not beg. She warned of pain but did not apologize. He did not fully trust her. He did not fully understand her, but he knew deep in his heart that she was telling the truth. "I will take your offer to the High Admiral," he said, "and I will recommend that we accept." Vasquez nodded. "Then let us begin." The work began immediately. Human engineers worked side by side with Varethian technicians, studying the infected systems, mapping the spread of the silence. It was strange to see them together. The Varethians were tall and gray, with for arms and for eyes. The humans were small and soft, with their 2 arms and their strange round faces. But they worked well together, speaking through translation devices, sharing knowledge across the gap between species. Captain Vasquez did not join the engineering teams. She had a different task. As a gesture of trust and gratitude, High Admiral Kethrava had given her access to the Imperial archives. These were the records of the Varethian Empire, 12,000 years of history stored in crystal memory cores. It was an honor that few outsiders had ever received. Vasquez suspected it was also a test. The Varethians wanted to see what she would do with this knowledge. They wanted to know what kind of people the humans really were. She spent 3 days in the archive chamber. It was a vast room filled with glowing pillars, each one containing millions of documents. She could not read Varethian writing, but the translation device in her ear converted everything into English. She read reports and histories and official documents. She learned about the rise of the empire, its great conquests, its golden ages, and she learned about its crimes. On the 4th day, she found the files about Sector 7G. Her sector, her home. The documents were clear and detailed. Sector 7G was classified as a developmental quarantine zone. The species there were young and primitive, not yet ready for contact with the greater galaxy. They were being watched, studied, evaluated, and they were scheduled for integration. Vasquez read the words several times, making sure she understood. Integration. It sounded so gentle, so clean, but as she read further, she understood what it really meant. When the Empire integrated a species, it did not make them partners. It made them subjects. Their governments were replaced with Varethian governors. Their languages were forbidden. Their cultures were erased and replaced with Varethian customs. Their populations were scattered across different worlds, mixed with other integrated species, until their original identity was completely destroyed. This was not conquest. This was extinction with a gentle name. Vasquez found the list of species that had been integrated over the centuries. 17 major civilizations, hundreds of smaller ones, billions of lives changed forever. She read about the resistance movements, the rebellions, the desperate fights for freedom. She read about how they were all crushed, how the leaders were executed and the followers were scattered. And then she found the schedule for Sector 7G. The plan was to begin integration in the year 2340. Earth calendar, 300 years from when the Defiant had left Earth. Her grandchildren might have lived to see it. Earth was on that list. Humanity was going to be erased. She sat alone in the archive chamber for a long time after that. She did not move. She did not speak. She just stared at the glowing words floating in the air before her. This was the empire she was trying to save. These were the people she was helping. They had planned to destroy everything she loved. They had planned to take her world, her people, her entire civilization and grind it into dust, and they did not even see it as wrong. To them, it was simply how things were done. The door to the chamber opened. Lieutenant Commander David Okonkwo walked in, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. He was her oldest friend, her most trusted officer. They had served together for 20 years. He saw the documents floating in the air. He saw the expression on her face. He understood immediately. "Captain," he said softly, "they were going to take everything from us, David." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Our cultures, our languages, our right to choose our own future. And they did not even see us as people, just resources to be collected." Okonkwo stood beside her, reading the document she had found. His face grew hard as he understood what he was seeing. "What do we do?" he asked. It was a simple question with no simple answer. They could leave. They could take the Defiant and return to human space, leaving the Empire to die in the silence. It would be justice of a kind. The Empire had planned to destroy humanity. Now humanity could watch the Empire destroy itself. But Vasquez thought about the people she had met on this ship, the young sensor officer who had first detected them, the engineers who worked alongside her crew, eager to learn, desperate to save their families, the common soldiers who looked at the humans with fear and hope mixed together in their eyes. They had not made the plans for integration. They had not chosen to be conquerors. They had simply been born into an empire that told them their way was the only way. Did they deserve to die for the crimes of their ancestors? Vasquez closed her eyes. She thought about human history. She thought about the empires her own species had built, the atrocities her own people had committed, slavery, genocide, conquest. Humanity had done all of these things and more. They had been monsters too in their time, but they had also changed. Slowly, painfully, over centuries of struggle, they had learned to be better. They had not erased their past. They had faced it. They had built something new from the ashes of their shame. Could the Varethians do the same? Could this dying empire become something different? She did not know. But she knew one thing for certain. She would not become the thing she hated. She would not let old crimes justify new ones. She would not watch billions die because of plans that had never been carried out. She opened her eyes and stood up. Her back was straight. Her face was calm. We saved them anyway, she said. OKO and KWO nodded slowly. And the integration plans? The list of species to be conquered? Vasquez looked at the glowing documents one last time. Then she closed them with a wave of her hand. We save them first. Then we have a conversation about the future. A very long conversation. She started walking toward the door, then stopped and looked back at her friend. And David, make a copy of everything in these archives. Everything about integration, about conquered species, about all of it. Send it back to Earth on a secure channel. Why? Vasquez smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because when this is over, someone needs to remember what almost happened. Someone needs to make sure it never happens again. She walked out of the chamber, leaving the weight of history behind her. But she carried its lessons with her, and she knew that the real work was just beginning. The War Council met in the Great Hall of the Eternal Sovereignty. Around a massive circular table sat the highest leaders of the dying empire. High Admiral Kethrava was there, his old face tired and drawn. Ambassador Tyrovos sat beside him, his hands folded nervously on the table. There were generals and governors, scientists and administrators, all of them looking at the small group of humans standing at the center of the room. Captain Vasquez stood straight and calm. Behind her stood Commander Okonkwo and Chief Engineer Sarah Chen. They had spent 2 weeks studying the silence, working with Varethian technicians, testing theories and running simulations. Now they had an answer. The silence cannot be stopped, Vasquez said. The room exploded with voices. Leaders shouted over each other, demanding explanations, refusing to accept her words. Kethrava raised his hand, and slowly the noise faded. Explain, he said. The infection is too deep. Engineer Chen said, stepping forward. Your entire civilization is built on a single quantum network. Every system, every device, every piece of technology is connected to this network. The silence is inside that network now. It is part of it. You cannot remove it without destroying everything it touches. Then we are doomed. A governor whispered. No, Vasquez said. The silence cannot be stopped, but it can be starved. She activated a holographic display in the center of the room. It showed a map of the empire, with the areas affected by the silence marked in red. The red covered more than half the map. The silence spreads through your network. Vasquez explained. It needs the network to survive, just like a fire needs wood. If we remove the wood, the fire dies. You want us to destroy our own network? Admiral Kethrava asked. Yes, all of it. Every quantum connection, every linked system, every piece of technology that connects to the central grid. We shut it all down at once, across the entire empire. The silence that followed was heavier than any the silence itself had caused. The leaders stared at Vasquez as if she had grown a second head. That is madness. Tyrovos said quietly. Our entire civilization runs on that network. Ships, communications, life support, food production. Everything is connected. If we shut it down, billions will die. Billions will die if you do not, Vasquez replied. The silence is spreading faster every day. At its current rate, it will consume everything within 3 months. You will not have time to find another solution. This is your only chance. She asks us to become primitives. A general slammed his fist on the table. To throw away 12,000 years of progress. We would be no better than the savages we conquered. The savages you conquered, Okonkwo said, his voice cold, would have survived this disaster. Their technology was simple, independent, disconnected. They built things that could fail separately, not all at once. You called them primitive, but they were smart enough not to put all their trust in one system. The general opened his mouth to argue, but Kethrava spoke first. What happens after the shutdown? Engineer Chen answered. We have been working with your technicians to design backup systems. Simple technology based on human designs. Chemical engines instead of quantum drives. radio communication instead of instant network links, basic computers that do not connect to anything. These systems are ready to deploy on about 40% of your worlds, Vasquez added. The rest will need to rely on stored supplies and manual systems until we can reach them. It will be hard. Many people will struggle, but they will survive. And then, Kethrava pressed, and then you rebuild, slowly, carefully. You create new networks that are smaller and separate. You build redundancy into everything. You learn from this disaster and make sure it never happens again. The debate went on for 3 days. Leaders argued and shouted and threatened. Some demanded that the humans leave. Others wanted to try other solutions, even though none existed. Fear and pride fought against logic and survival. In the end, it was the silence itself that decided. On the second night of the debate, 12 more systems went dark. 30 billion people lost contact with the rest of the empire. Their fate was unknown. The vote was called on the morning of the third day. It was not unanimous. Many leaders still refused to accept the human plan, but the majority agreed that the shutdown was authorized. The next 48 hours were the busiest of Vasquez's life. Human crews worked alongside Varithians to prepare the backup systems. Ships were positioned to respond to emergencies. Supplies were distributed to worlds that would soon lose their automated production. And then the moment came. Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Eternal Sovereignty beside High Admiral Kethrava. They watched as the final countdown began. "Are you ready?" she asked. Kethrava looked at her with his ancient eyes. "I have lived for 300 years. I have seen the Empire at the height of its power, and now I will watch it fall. You will watch it change," Vasquez said. "That is not the same as falling." The countdown reached 0 across the entire Varithian Empire. The network died. Every quantum connection shut down at once. Ships lost power and drifted. Cities went dark. Communication stopped. For 6 long hours, the Empire ceased to exist as a connected civilization. In those hours, many died. Ships without backup power crashed. Stations lost life support. People on planets without stored supplies began to starve. It was a disaster beyond anything the Empire had ever experienced, but it was also salvation. The silence needed the network to spread. Without the network, it had nothing to consume. It burned through the last connected systems and then stopped. The fire had run out of wood. And then, slowly, the backup systems began to work. First came the lights. Simple chemical generators powered up in cities across the Empire. Then came the communication. Radio signals, old and slow but reliable, began to connect worlds again. Then came the ships. Vessels with backup engines, crude and ugly but functional, started to move through space. Vasquez stood at the window, watching the first lights appear on the planet below. Small points of brightness in the darkness. Not many, not yet, but growing. Beside her, Kethrava was crying. Varithians did not cry often, but when they did, their tears were gray like their skin. They rolled down his face and fell to the floor. "We have destroyed ourselves," he whispered. "No," Vasquez said. She put her small human hand on his arm. "You have destroyed what was killing you. The Empire as you knew it is gone, but your people survive, and survival is the beginning of everything." Kethrava looked at her. "Why did you help us? You knew what we planned for your world. You saw the records. You had every reason to let us die." Vasquez thought about the question for a long moment. "Because revenge is easy," she said finally. "Justice is easy, but mercy is hard, and I have learned that the hardest choices are often the right ones." She watched the lights growing on the planet below. Each one was a family, a community, a group of people who would live because of what they had done today. "You have a chance now," she said. "A chance to build something new, something better. What you do with that chance is up to you." Kethrava nodded slowly. He did not thank her. He did not know how, but he understood. The old empire was dead, and something new was waiting to be born. 1 year had passed since the shutdown. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on a balcony high above the capital city of the Varithian homeworld. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reminded her of sunsets on Earth. Below her, the city stretched to the horizon, a mix of old and new, Ancient towers built during the height of the Empire stood beside simple new structures, made from basic materials. The old and the new, living side by side. It was not beautiful. Not yet, but it was alive. Beside her stood Kethrava. He no longer used his military title. The fleet he had commanded no longer existed. Most of the great warships had been stripped for parts, their components used to build the new independent systems that now kept the Varithian worlds connected. He was simply Kethrava now, an old man watching his world rebuild. "Your ship is ready to leave," he said. His voice was quieter than it used to be, softer. A year of hard work and harder choices had changed him. Vasquez nodded. "The Defiant has been here too long. My crew needs to return home, and your people need to learn to stand on their own. We would not be standing at all without you." "That is not true." Vasquez turned to face him. "We showed you a path, but you walked it yourselves. Every system you rebuilt, every connection you restored, every life you saved in the past year, that was your work, your effort, your choice to survive." Kethrava was silent for a moment. Below them, lights were beginning to appear in the city as darkness approached. Each light was a small victory, a sign of life in a civilization that had nearly died. "The other species are coming," he said finally. "The ones we integrated, the ones we conquered and absorbed over the centuries. They have heard about the Empire's fall. They are organizing, gathering, preparing." Vasquez nodded. She had expected this. "What do they want?" "Justice, reparations. Some want revenge. They want their cultures back, their languages, their identities. They want everything we took from them." "And what do you want?" Kethrava closed his fur eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet with unshed tears. "I want to make it right, but I do not know how." "How do you give back what has been destroyed? How do you restore what has been erased? Some of those cultures are gone forever, lost. We cannot bring them back." "No," Vasquez agreed. "You cannot, but you can do something else. You can admit what you did. You can apologize. You can help them rebuild what can be rebuilt and mourn what cannot. You can give them freedom and support and the right to choose their own future." "Will that be enough?" "I do not know. It might not be. Some of them might never forgive you. Some might hate you forever. That is their right." Vasquez looked at the sunset, thinking of human history, of all the crimes her own species had committed and the long, painful process of facing them. But the work of making amends is not about being forgiven. It is about doing the right thing regardless of the outcome. Kethrava nodded slowly. He understood. It would be hard. It would take generations. There would be anger and pain and conflict. But it was the only path forward that did not lead to more destruction. "The Council has voted," he said. "The Empire is officially dissolved. We are calling ourselves the Varithian Confederation now. Each world governs itself. We are connected but not controlled. Separate but united. That sounds like a good beginning. It is your idea, your design. We built it from the lessons you taught us." Vasquez smiled. "We taught you how to survive. What you built from that survival is your own creation." They stood in silence as the sun finished setting and the stars began to appear. Somewhere up there, hidden by the atmosphere, the Defiant waited in orbit. A small ugly ship that had changed the fate of a galaxy. "I still do not understand," Kethrava said. "We would have enslaved your world, erased your identity, made you nothing but resources for our empire. And you saved us. Why?" Vasquez had been asked this question many times in the past year. By Varithians, by humans, by herself in the quiet hours of the night. She had thought about it deeply, searching for the right words. "Humanity has done terrible things," she said. "We have conquered and enslaved and destroyed. We have been the monsters in our own story more times than we like to remember. We are not innocent. We are not pure. We have blood on our hands that will never fully wash away." She turned to face him fully, her small human form standing before his tall Varithian body. "But we have also learned, changed, grown, not because it was easy, but because we chose to be better. We looked at the worst parts of ourselves and decided that we did not want to be those things anymore. It took centuries. It took pain and struggle and failure. But we kept trying." She reached out and took his hand. His skin was cool and rough, alien, but also, somehow, familiar. "That is why we saved you. Not because you deserved it, Not because you earned it, but because we refuse to be the thing we hate. We refuse to let old crimes justify new ones. We refuse to watch billions die for the sins of their ancestors. Kethrava's grip tightened around her hand. You gave us a second chance, he said. A chance we did not deserve. Everyone deserves a second chance, Vasquez replied. The question is what you do with it. She released his hand and stepped back. The moment of connection passed, but something remained. An understanding between two very different people from two very different worlds. We will be watching, she said. Humanity will be watching. Not as enemies, not as conquerors, but as neighbors. We know what you almost did. We will not forget, but we are willing to see what you become. Kethrava straightened to his full height. For a moment, he looked like the admiral he used to be. Proud, strong. But the pride was different now. It was not the pride of a conqueror. It was the pride of a survivor. Then watch, he said, and we will try to make you proud. Vasquez nodded. She turned and walked back into the building, heading toward the shuttle that would take her back to her ship. At the doorway, she paused and looked back one more time. One more thing, she said. The schedule for integrating Earth. The plans for conquering my world. They are deleted, destroyed, Kethrava confirmed, along with every integration plan ever written. They will never be used again. Good. Vasquez smiled. Then maybe there is hope for all of us. She walked away, leaving Kethrava alone on the balcony. He watched the stars for a long time, thinking about the future, thinking about the past, thinking about the small, impossible ship that had come out of the darkness and shown his people how to survive. The next morning, the Defiant left Vrithian space. It was a small ship, ugly, crude, built by a species that should not have existed. But as it disappeared into the distance, carrying its crew of strange, soft creatures back to their small blue world, Kethrava felt something he had not felt in centuries. Hope. The Empire was gone. The Confederation was young and fragile. The future was uncertain and full of challenges. But for the first time in a very long time, that future was not written in blood and conquest. It was written in second chances, and somewhere in the darkness of space, heading home to a world that would never be conquered. Captain Elena Vasquez opened her personal journal and wrote a single line. They expected us to be savages. They planned to make us slaves. Instead, we taught them how to be free. She closed the journal and looked out at the stars. The galaxy was big and dark and full of dangers, but humanity was out there now, and that changed everything.